Okay, back to the beginning of the story. So I was on my way to Vermont, the very state Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye were heading to in White Christmas. Oddly enough, the movie was actually shot in LA, in the same studio that the game show was shot, on which I won my trip to Vermont. Weird. Well, maybe only weird to me. Flying out of the Delta terminal of the Detroit airport for the first time, I was surprised to see a sound and light show as I rode along on the moving sidewalk. Pretty cool. But the problem was, Superstorm Sandy was bearing down on the East Coast. It was going to cause a ton of trauma for the people living there, but it was already causing problems for the airlines.
Hurricane Sandy is expected to make landfall on the East Coast near Atlantic City and then push ashore slowly. The massive storm is expected to cause extensive damage on the coast as well as inland as it makes its way slowly up through New England toward Maine.
Well, as we know now, the biggest damage was on the coast. The people who lived there went through a horrible, deadly storm. But at the time, the airlines were taking no chances. We were in fact the last flight from Detroit to Vermont. Everything else, canceled. We were lucky to make it to Vermont at all. When we got to the airport in Burlington, Vermont, it was in the process of shutting down. Stores, food stands, everything was closing. The flight board showed nearly every single flight canceled, but the expected storm had not gotten there, so we made it safely to our resort. Our suite at Smuggler's Notch was spacious and nice. I'm not sure how these timeshare things work, but the owner's books were on the bookshelf, their dishes were in the cupboards. It was more than a little like staying at someone's house while they're away. As I explained in the last episode, the resort was between seasons. No summer water slides, no winter ski slopes. Too late even for the autumn colors. But at least the indoor pool was open. When the storm finally hit us, it was nothing. People on the East Coast lived through hell while we got a few puddles. Oh, I was thankful, but watching the coverage over the next few days, it was easy to feel guilty. But we had the whole week in Vermont, and since, as I said in the last episode, there was little to do at the actual resort, we decided to make our own fun. So we explored near and far, visiting the hotel owned by the Von Trapp family singers from the movie The Sound of Music. Their high-end restaurant ended up being a lot less interesting to me than one of their rustic shops where they served simple fare, like cheese and meat on bread. And Mickey spent a fair amount of time building a metal scorpion he vowed to set loose on the world. But let me back up once again in this story, back to when we first arrived in Vermont but hadn't yet headed off to the resort because we were too hungry. On the shore of Lake Champlain is a nice little restaurant called Shanty on the Shore, and I was determined to try their raw clams. But Remy, you might say to me, raw clams are odd. Why are you doing this? Maybe they're not odd to you, but I hadn't had them before, so they're odd to me. I love raw oysters, but many people have told me I need to try raw clams, so I was gonna do it. The raw clams arrived beside the more familiar raw oysters. They're milder than raw oysters, a little less sweet and firmer, and utterly delicious. That is really good. It's super fresh, it's really good, and I just love it. Sure, they're not as adventurous as the food I'll eat next episode, a wild creature that can be found in the forest of Vermont, but sitting on the shore of Lake Champlain, awaiting what could be a dangerous storm, I couldn't imagine eating anything better.